like choosing your battles and picking your moments. I feel like for the most part, if you do that, you'll be able to find a way to collaborate with anybody.
This episode is brought to you by the best-selling book, Rise of the Film Entrepreneur, How to Turn Your Independent Film into a Money-Making Business. Learn more at filmbizbook.com. I'd like to welcome to the show, Pete Chapman, man. How you doing, Pete?
I'm doing well, brother. Good to see you, Alex.
Good to see you too, man. We've been trying to do this for months now, back and forth between our schedules, man. I'm so happy we finally got to do this, man. So thank you for your patience, and I'm looking forward to getting into the weeds with you about the fun and easy world of the film industry.
Oh, of course. It's like snap, crackle, pop, you know?
I mean, I make millions. I mean, that's the way it works, right? It's just, I mean, you think you could make a movie. I have a $200 million movie coming up. I don't know about you, but
yeah, I'm thinking 350, you know.
I mean, yeah, push the edge. So first question, brother, how and why in God's green earth did you want to get into this business?
You know, I blame my high school. I'm looking at what I think is a Super 8 camera. I can't tell if it's a Bolex or what on your
I have multiple Super 8s and 16s back there. Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, I see the lower shelf now. And, you know, I had a Super 8 filmmaking class in my high school in New Jersey, Columbia High School in Maplewood, New Jersey. Mm-hmm. We had to take these electives, and I had taken architecture in 10th grade, and we had to build a little house, and I thought I'd be an architect until we got into the measurements. And I mean, it was like 1/1,000,000th scale of a home, you know what I mean? But like I was like, I like this, but it's not for me. And so I was like, well, let me do photography. And I was like, this is cool. I did the TV station. That was cool, but something about like the moving image just kind of really connected to me. And so I picked up that Super 8 camera. My high school film teacher, George Chase, had gone to NYU. And so I'm kind of hearing these anecdotes about NYU, and at the same time discovering the reality of the director. You know what I mean? Like, there's a person for whom, you know, what I'm seeing, you know, we can argue about the auteur theory, but like there's a person for whom is kind of heavily responsible and in films mostly responsible, arguably, for what I'm seeing. And I think in the same way I was attracted to architecture and designing a world, film spoke to me, and I found that I was pretty fluent with what to do with the camera, and how to edit pretty early. And so I was like, it was like creative crack.
Yeah, I call it the beautiful disease, because once you get it, you can't get rid of it.
Exactly.
No question. So looking through your filmography, man, I see that you did a tremendous amount of shorts, man. You did a lot of short films at the beginning of your career, and even throughout a little bit. What impact did shorts do for you to get you those first paid directing gigs? Because I'm assuming these weren't all paid short directing gigs.
None of them were. They were all debt fulfilling prophecies. You know what I'm saying? But I think that look, I was going to make I'll answer the question, but I'm starting here. I was going to make a short in 2020, but when COVID hit, it was too cumbersome economically to pay for all the COVID protocols. And so I made an audio podcast, a 1-episode audio podcast, and narrative. And so I would make a short right now. Like, I feel like short filmmaking is its own little masterpiece. It's a great challenge to tell a story or pick a theme and deal with an event, you know, a setup, an event, and kind of propel the audience to imagine what happens after the conclusion. Because to me, there's no resolution in a short film. It's too short. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, I made shorts throughout my NYU time. I made shorts in high school, probably like 10 shorts, you know. And after I graduated, I just found like shorts were the way to stay sharp because it takes forever to make a feature film. And it's almost like, in my mind, it's like if you're a chef, you cook, right? You can't say like the last meal I cooked was in 1999 and it's now 2004. It's like,
but I'm still a cook.
But I'm still a cook, right? So I was always making shorts because it was feeding my passion and keeping me energized. And so specifically though, for how it fed into my career, I mean, my thesis film went to Sundance, coming out of NYU. But that didn't necessarily, there was no real straight line to the next thing. You know, it took 6 more years before I raised the money to make my feature. And then, but in the middle of that, I had made like 2 or 3 more shorts, which I used to kind of build awareness around myself as a director and filmmaker while I was trying to independently raise money. So more people would become aware of like the kid from New Jersey. And then, you know, most recently, man, like after 2 features, a doc and a narrative feature, you know, winning a screenplay competition at Tribeca, a whole bunch of, you know, branded content projects. In 2014, I made a short just for myself. And it was kind of like, let me see what I can do when I'm not doing it for a client. And I paid for it. I paid $30,000 out of pocket. And that short got picked up by HBO. And so that short then led to a bunch of these director programs and helped me get my first television job. But I didn't get paid to direct anything narrative until 2017.
So overnight is what you're saying. So just
yes, like it took overnight.
Overnight, just out of film school, you just jumped in, just got mad money. So exactly. So I want to take back a little bit what you said, because it was really interesting. I always love to point this out for filmmakers because there's such a myth behind getting into a Sundance or things like that. I mean, even getting into NYU, it's a lottery ticket to get into NYU or USC or UCLA, one of these big film schools. And so you already were coming out of a really, really arguably one of the best film schools in the country, if not the world. And then out of that, your thesis film gets called into Sundance. So I just want to go back into your mind back then, man.
Right.
Because I could only imagine what that was like.
Right.
How old were you when that happened?
Let's see. That was 2001 that it went to Sundance. So I was
20 something.
Yeah, I was like 20. How old was I? Hold on. Now I guess that doesn't seem right.
Let's say late 20s. Let's say late 20s.
Yeah, well, I was born in 77. That was 2001. So that was what, 24?
24. All right. So you're 24 years old. So you obviously have the entire world understood at this point in your life. You're completely all together there, because I definitely was not. But so when you're sent to Sundance, do you automatically like, this is it, man? I'm ready. I'm on my way. I'm like, so am I right?
Yeah, I thought all the dots had been connected.
Done.
You know,
ready.
I thought like the phone's gonna start ringing. You know, and part of that too, man, is like you can buy into these things that people tell you or show you, and on one level, like I always think about, like, you know, when I was raising money for my feature, and after I had done it, everybody wanted me to kind of look at their business plan, and I'd be like, look, your appendix of comparable films can't all be lightning in a bottle, you know, Spitfire grill, whatever that, like all these, like, you know, $10 million pickups. Like it's not real.
So can I just take a shot at the dark of what those movies were?
Oh yeah.
Napoleon Dynamite.
Yep.
Blair Witch Project.
Yep.
Paranormal Activity.
Yep.
Did they even go as far back as like Brothers McMullen or El Mariachi?
Of course. And it's like, and your film is not even any of these genres, right? But these are comparables. And so, you know, I feel like people buy into that. And like, and even for me, like in film school, it was like the the kind of pinnacle of student filmmaking was Sundance. Or Cannes, Cine Foundation for student films. And so when that had happened, I was like, okay, cool. Like I'm like rubbing my hands together, like things are good. But it didn't work out that way, And so it was but I always try and hop back and say, well, what is the real lesson here? I'm a big basketball fan, and Kobe is one of my favorite players.
Right.
And I remember like watching something he was talking about, like this playoff game where in his rookie year he had 3 air balls, right? And people were laughing and booing, and he was like, okay, well, what's going on here? It's like, I've never played 82 games. High school right. is 35 games. My legs are tired. That's why I don't have any lift in my shot. So y'all can laugh and y'all can do all these things, but I know how to train for next year. So like my takeaway from that experience was like, I went to NYU and I kind of minded my own business, and I didn't really have anyone that kind of looked at me as their guy, any professor, you know what I mean? And this is, it is what it is, right? Because you always have advocates. And then at the same time, that's really my main point. And that's kind of driven by the fact that there was, after Sundance, we had a festival at NYU where, like, if you just finish the film, you show it and it's selected. And there were awards at that festival, and they were using the fact that my film was one of 6 NYU films that went to Sundance that year. Like, they were using it as promotion and advertising, and then it didn't get recognized for any of the craft awards or anything. And at my young age, I was like, well, how the fuck you doing that? Right. Like that's,
using me to sell, but you ain't give me a trophy, brother. Get a certificate of a participation, something.
Exactly. And so like in my naivete, I got scheduled a meeting with the head of the department, and,
you didn't. Oh my God.
He and the great guy, David Irving, one of my favorite teachers. And he was like, look, we've had films that have won the student prize or won the short film prize at Sundance and have come back here and not received any accolades. So I was like, okay, touche. But the takeaway for me was like, I think if I would have had more people on my side and advocating for me and aware of what I was doing, that maybe that would have been different. And so that's what drove me, to your earlier question, to make all these short films, because when I went back to New Jersey after leaving NYU, I wanted to make sure that was never going to happen again, and people would be aware of me and what I was trying to do.
So they did you a favor. They did you a favor by not being advocate for you. You had to like, I got to do this myself, and you started hustling it out yourself. Sometimes things that happen to you when you're younger, and you're like, man, why'd that happen to me? It's probably the best thing. That it forces you to go in a direction that you might have not gone through. So that's always fascinating to me, man. Because when you get that Sundance call and you're like, oh my God, I got into Sundance. Everyone's like, you're done. It's over. You should get those phone calls. No, it doesn't work that way. Yeah. So between the Sundance short and your first feature was what, 6 years?
Because the short shot in 99, it took me so long to get the finishing funds that it didn't go to Sundance until 01.
Okay.
But it was 99 I graduated, and that was May, and it was June of 05 that we started shooting Premium, my feature.
Great. All right. So during those years, how the hell did you survive, brother? Like, how did you survive? How did you keep going? How did you mentally break through the barriers of, I have to guess that this was thoughts that were going through your head. Did I make the right choice? Am I on the right path? Am I really that good? Like, is it all these, because this is what goes through a normal director's mind.
Right. Well, I gotta say, man, it's funny because when I get asked these questions, I realize how I can sound, but fuck it. Like, you're asking me. So
go.
I always knew that I would work harder than anybody else. You know what I mean? Like, I just felt like once I like, I'm gonna like I observe. I'm gonna sit back. I'm gonna watch how this works, and then I'm going to gain some information about how it works right now, because it can work differently next month. It could work differently in New York from LA. But so like there's always a playing field that I need to look at and get a handle on before I decide how I'm going to inject myself into the game. Right. And so, I was just always like, well, okay, I learned this, but the more I do, the better I'll get. So that's also what shorts were for, right? Like, I would do things like I would go home to my mom's for like holidays, and I'd make videos like of my little nephew, all from his point of view, like when he was 2 years old, because I wanted to try shooting from a kid's perspective. And years later, when I did TV shows with kids, I had that in my back pocket, So I feel like I'm kind of straying from the answer, but I was never really deterred. I was always like, well, what's the information to take from what's happening right now? And that was driven by this question of like, is everything, am I doing everything that I can? And I think the answer will always be no. So I can always refine and try and improve my outcomes.
So you were asking the right questions as opposed to the negative questions that I was asking. Bottom line is like those three questions I asked you are the questions that go through a lot of directors' heads, especially during those years, not months, years that things aren't working out the way you expect them to work out.
Right.
But you switched it in your mind, and you're like, what can I do to keep going? What can I do? You were asking positive questions that created positive answers that kept you going in an easier way than the struggle I went through.
Right. Well, I wish I could remember the quote, and I put it on my Instagram a few months ago, but the person was talking about how in the beginning, we don't have talent, but we have taste. Mm-hmm. And it's our taste that keeps us going. We make those early projects and recognize from our taste that it's not where we want it to be, but we have a target that we're going to reach, and we're going to refine with each thing till there's a point where what we do, what we can actually accomplish is commensurate with our taste. And it's always that taste, and then like a little bit of ego too, that lets you think that it's like, who the fuck thinks they can be president? You know what I mean? Like you got to have a certain level of ego. And I think that you got to have a certain level of ego too, to think that, you're going to, whether it's raise money independently or be hired to direct something that costs millions of dollars. Like there's a particular kind of drive that I think, fills this industry. And it's also why you get so many challenges sometimes, because you put all those people with all that kind of drive in a room
and all hell breaks loose. Yeah, it's kind of like, it's a slight bit of insanity. You have to be insane to be in the film industry in general at the beginning. There's an insane, because there's such a, like, who are you? Like you said, who the hell are you to think that someone's going to give you $1 million to go make your vision? Right. Like there's a slight bit of an insanity and ego that is needed to do that. Yes. Can you imagine what James Cameron said when he walked into Fox's office back in the early 2000s and said, listen, I'm going to make a movie about a new IP. I'm going to build out entire new technology. No one's ever seen it. Hell, I don't even know if it's going to work. I just need 100 million just to see if we can get this ball rolling. It's probably going to cost about 500, 600 million.
Right.
That takes, arguably, there's probably no other filmmaker on the planet that could have had that conversation. Anybody, not Spielberg, not Nolan, not Finch, nobody. But that's who James Cameron is. Yeah,
and you got to believe that you're the one.
You got to believe you're Neo, man, and you're in the Matrix, and you can stop bullets, and that's what a director does in so many ways. Now, all right, so you made your first feature. How did you get from that first feature into television directing? How did you make that pivot, and what was that first gig that you got?
Man, so it was that feature that feature was premium. It starred Dorian Missick, Zoe Saldana, Hill Harper, Frankie Faison, Bill Sadler. And it was a romantic dramedy. And it was me trying to, shake up the genre.
Ego again. Ego again, as we say.
Ego again, of course. Ego again. And of course, I'm proud of it, but I often look at it and wonder, like, and recognize all the things that I could have done better, because I was trying to be different before honoring some of the things that the genre needs, And again, right, like that's me. Like I gotta always go back and say, like, what could I have done better in this thing? And so, that led to the feature. And basically, man, there was just a stretch of, I'm working at NYU and as an assistant production coordinator, like signing forms and talking to the students about insurance and whatnot. I'm teaching at NYU, acting classes and then production classes. I'm on committees at NYU, and there's so much full circleness to it. Like there was a point when I was on the film festival committee, and now I had an opportunity to advocate for films, in a way that I felt like mine hadn't been advocated for. And kind of getting in those rooms and seeing the politics of these things, like all very eye-opening and affirming in understanding what's on the other side of our creative, output. And so, it was really that short film that I did for HBO that HBO picked up that really led to TV. And in an interesting way, I'll say for the industry, because I entered with this short, or that was my kind of access point into the industry, was a short. And then I did these director programs, Disney, ABC, HBO, Sony, and NBCU. It's almost like, not even almost, all the things that I did before that short film did not exist for the folks in the industry, because they were not involved with that. And so that is partly why I wrote my book, Transitions, because I wanted to have something that could be like, okay, here's like the director's journey and motivational handbook. That's like the subtitle, but like also it's like an autobiography of all these things that I've done. And now for those who do read it, it's like, oh, you actually were doing this for a long time before that short. But the first episode that I got, and anybody listen, I can't say enough how much of it this thing is. So it's just a marathon, and it's full circle. My first TV job that I booked was Blackish, and I had shadowed on Blackish in the Disney ABC program. But the thing that is important to note is that when I came to LA for the very first time in 2002, I'm 25 years old. I'm out here thinking I'm going to connect all the dots and just go and raise the money for my film. One of the first people I met hanging out with the star of my short, Dorian Missick, and who would be the star of my feature, I caught up with him and his cousin and his cousin's buddy, and it was Kenya Barris. So cut to 14 years later, he was the first person to offer me a job, because unlike everyone else, he was actually aware of all these things I had been doing, on the East Coast for 14, 15 years.
Wow, man. It's just, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show is because your journey is so indicative of a lot of filmmakers, and it just takes time. It's like, I was, and not to drop a name, but when Rick Linklater was on, one of the greatest quotes I ever heard about the film industry is like, whatever you think it is, it's going to take twice as long, and it's going to be twice as hard as you thought it's going to be.
Yeah.
And it's so true, because, and I'd argue it'd probably be 10 times as long as 10 times as hard, because, when you're young, man, when you're in your 20s, you're like, any day now, I'm going to get that call. Spielberg's going to call me. He's going to bring me into his office. I'm going to go to Universal, get the call in, drive on, go into the Amblin. I go, Mr. Spielberg, right. I love Raiders of the Lost Ark. I go, you've seen, and in your mind, this is the interaction. Hello, Steven. Hello, Pete. How are you? I saw Raiders of the Lost Ark. You didn't. Did you see Raiders of the Lost? What did you think? And that's how we all think that situation's going to be.
Right.
But it doesn't happen.
Never plays out like
Never.
It might. It may for somebody.
I do know a couple people that it actually did play out like that, but that's such again, these kind of lottery ticket anomalies in the business. Most of us, and you're a success story. You're working in the business now. And for every one of you, there might be 10,000 who's still grinding it out there, trying to get made. So that's the reality I want people to understand, but it's not that I'm trying to kill dreams. It's for people to understand the realities of what they're getting into. Do you agree?
I totally agree. Look here. I mean, here's something I say, and it's funny, man, because like I'm not trying to discourage anyone, with this statement, but there are several points in time where I could have just given up the dream and I would not have been crazy. No one would have been like, yo, he didn't try. You know what I mean? Like from 1999 to 2017 and all the varying things that I did with a modicum of financial, success, like barely, you know what I mean? Like I could have quit many times along the way and I would not have been a quitter for having done so, but the fact of the matter is, I feel like you've got to have that kind of like engine in your back, that battery in your back, because you just don't know how it's going to play out. And then if you do kind of pop off quick, I kind of, sometimes I feel for those folks that get there really quickly because then, they're in this position, they think, oh, it's just like that. And then when you go from being hot to like not, you have no idea what it's like to, have to navigate, the perfect storm.
And I've talked to some of those guys who did pop, legendary guys who've popped at that early time. And man, a lot of times they're just not ready. Imagine if you would have gotten your first TV gig at 24.
Yeah.
Can you imagine how the ego would have run wild with you? And like you could have, I mean, I had an opportunity at 26 to almost make a $20 million movie with the mob, and that's a whole other book and story. I met all the big movie stars and I did all this whole thing. And I look back, I go, my God, if I would have actually gotten that gig and worked with the caliber of stars at that age, I would have absolutely self-destructed. I was just not prepared to handle that. Right.
I'll tell you, man, if I would have gotten my first episode of TV at 38 instead of 40, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know if it pans out like to the point where now, I mean, it's been since 2017. Now I'm getting close to 60 episodes of TV. Like now I'm attached to pilots and I'm doing comedy and drama. And it's like the amount of things that I had to have learned in my other pursuits to recognize human nature and pitfalls and traps that come with something that is as high stakes as television, where people's jobs and livelihoods are on the line. And, like, I don't think I would have navigated it as well. And so I'm actually, thankful for, how it's panned out, because now it's just like you start, it's like when you get in the zone, I beat the sports analogies to death, but like when you get into that zone and like you hear those athletes talk about like the game is moving slower, you know what I mean? Because like I see where people are going to go, because I've been through so many scenarios that like, like on these shows where you get a script late or you get new pages and I'm like, boom, boom, boom. Okay, I've shot so many scenes that give me a couple minutes by myself and I'll figure out how to block it and shoot it, and that's just part of, it's like what you pay a lawyer for. Like you've gotten people out of jail for this before. It takes you 2 minutes to do it for me, but it's all the years of what you've done before that allow you to keep me and maintain my freedom.
I mean, I'll tell you what, and I agree with you 100%, because as you're growing and getting older and you're going through the business, you're putting more tools in the toolbox, and it's not a pleasant experience doing that stuff that at the time you're like, man, what am I doing? But only in hindsight, as you get older, you look back and go, man, thank God I didn't get on Project Greenlight. Thank God I didn't get on that reality show. I mean, I was there, man. I was
right?
top.
People
I
see
was.
you at your worst.
I was top 20, brother. I almost made it to season 2. So I get it. So like these kind of things, you just at the time you're like, my life is over. Oh my God. And then you look back, I'm like, oh man, I dodged a bullet. And it's the same. That's life though. You're like, oh, thank God I didn't go on a date with that girl. She went crazy. Or things like that. But that's life. And I think that's something that film school doesn't teach you, doesn't understand about as a director. It's a lot to do about life, about life experience, even more so than the technique and the craft. The craft and the technique you pick up along the way. It's that human nature thing that they don't talk about.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. For people listening right now, I'm pointing at Alex.
Absolutely, man.
I'm in complete agreement with that. Yeah.
So, all right. So let me ask you. So you obviously were shadowing through these programs on some of these shows. So you weren't new to a television set. But when you walk on,
actually I was. I had never been on a TV set the first time I shadowed.
No, the shadow. Yeah. But after you're shadowing, I'm talking about when you got your first paid gig. So yeah, when you're shadowing, you're on the set and it's like you're learning and you're absorbing so much stuff. But then when you got that first gig, that Blackish set, and you're on set, and you've been there before, but now you're the man. What is it like walking onto that set mentally? What are you dealing with mentally on that day?
Right. Well, can I give you a little story? Because so I booked that episode first, and the way TV works is they book well in advance. I think it might have been April of 2017 that I booked. So season 3 was still shooting. And I booked this episode that would shoot October into November of the same year for season. It would be the 12th episode of season 4. So that's like at that point 6 months out. But what happens is you have 3 stakeholders that hire you. You've got obviously the showrunner, representing the show. You've got the studio, and then you got the network. And sometimes it might be the same company but different departments, like ABC Studios, and then there's ABC the network. But once I got that job, now I'm kind of semi-approved, right? Even though I hadn't done one yet, I'm semi-approved. Then I had interviewed for an episode of Insecure season 2, and I had never done anything, so they were, understandably not looking to hire someone who had never done an episode of TV. But what they did offer was like, look, we're thinking about doing this show within the show where like all the characters watch this show and it becomes like a running thing, like they comment on it and whatever. And if we do that, we're thinking about hiring you for that. And so back and forth, and they ended up doing it. And so it was called Due North. And in season 2, it's what all the characters watch. And it was like Scandal and Antebellum, times, right? And so it starred. So this was this is what got me into the DGA. And it starred Regina King, Scott Foley, Michael J. White, right? So like, and it was a 1-day shoot, and it was 14 pages, right? And so I was like, that's crazy, but we'll figure it out. And I remember and they had to build this whole set, where it's in like a barn on a plantation and all that stuff. And I'm like, wow, this is like crazy. Like, this is like money. You know what I mean? Even though it's just a little thing within the show. And I remember we were getting toward the end of the day, and I was in the last scene, which was like a big, like dramatic, you're lying and I did this and I'm fucking her and this and that. Right. And so I was like, I don't have enough time. And I was like, all right, I know how to get this, but it feels crazy. And I was like, all right, look, everybody, this is how we're going to block it. And I told the crew, like, we're going to spend time blocking it. But then when we shoot this, I'm going to call freeze, and I'm just going to move the cameras to where they need to go next, because I don't have time to shoot all of this. And it was like a weird thing. So I was like, man, I feel like I'm exposing myself, but like at the same time, this is an unrealistic amount of pages to shoot, and this is the only way to get it. And so I did that, and we got it, and it was dope because I think everybody rallied around this like super guerrilla approach.
Yeah.
And so anyhow, I did that. That got me into the DGA. That shot May 31st. I have a very good memory. And so when it's not COVID fog. And then because I was in the program and ABC knew me, they hired me to do some interstitials because they knew I did branded content. I did 4 interstitials with the Blackish kids for Walmart for back to school. So that shot in July of 2017. So now I'm on the Blackish set with the Blackish kids, and I'm working with some of the crew. And then Grownish got greenlit. And because I was approved and it was a new show, and I don't know if everybody was like, if they were, I don't know, but they offered me one. So I directed that before I directed Blackish, even though I had booked that first. So I got to get the TV episode jitters out of the way with people who were more my age, you know what I mean? And also that I had just worked with on the commercials. And so when I showed up in October to do Blackish, I at least felt I had shot and edited an episode of TV. And so some of the jitters were out, but like, you know, when Lawrence Fishburne walks on set.
It's Morpheus, man. Morpheus just walked on set.
Exactly. You know, Tracy Ellis Ross, Anthony Anderson, Jennifer Lewis, like, you know, it's different. And I think, you know, all the shadowing that I did, I tried to treat it as if I'd been hired to direct the episode. But when you really are there and you're getting questions that you can't even anticipate, you know what I mean? Or you're getting like, you know, you're dealing with interpersonal dynamics that you didn't put into your shot list. You know what I'm saying? Like it's just
that's very nicely put, by the way. Very nicely put.
It's an you have to rise to the moment. And I feel like, you know, my thing was always you know, talk slowly but think quickly. And sometimes like you might feel like you're being silent for a while, and it might only be 2 seconds, but it's exaggerated in your moment of feeling inept. But I just never wanted to say anything that I didn't believe or that I couldn't back up.
So basically what you're telling me is that you got a date with a really pretty girl in October, and then all the other girls were like, well, he's going to date her eventually, so we can date him now. And that's kind of like how it worked out for you. But isn't that true though? You need to be Donnie Brasco in this business. You need to have somebody vouch for you to be able to go, right. Oh, well, if they vouched for him, then obviously he's got the goods. Then we could hire him. But right. before that Donnie Brasco moment, it's hard. Right. It's not impossible, right?
And look, I was super fortunate that first job was within a family. You know what I mean? Because I eventually did 6 Grownish, 6 Blackish, and an episode of Mixedish, you know, and I'd be remiss to say too, like, you know, I had a podcast in 2009 to 2011 with my buddy Anthony Artis called the Double Down Film Show. And our final guest was Issa Rae, right after she had raised the money for Awkward Black Girl to do like a big final episode. And so even that, like, there was a little bit of in the same way that there's a full circle with, you know, meeting Kenya Barris in 2002, you know, in 2011, there was that. In my branded content days, you know, I filmed a couple interviews with her year in like 2014 in New Orleans, you know what I mean? So it's just like, you're just marching along and you have all these kind of flanks that are all moving in the same direction, and you don't know, you know, when you're going to arrive at the target.
Now, you kind of hinted at this, but I have to ask you, how do you deal with the politics of a set, which is something they definitely don't teach you on in film school? The politics of interpersonal politics have nothing to do with you, politics that do have something to do with you, or even crew members or actors who are problems, like meaning that they don't want to work with you, that they have attitude. Right. And in film is a little different, because if you're the director of a feature, you have a little bit more juice. But if you're basically a freelancer coming in for one episode, how do you deal with that, brother?
Right. I mean, that's a great question. First, I never take anything personally because there's so much that is connected to each person's livelihood and creative experience that I have no awareness of that, and then there's personal stuff that people have going on. I just kind of like say, okay, like unless it's some wildly offensive, like you're coming at me type stuff, it's like whatever. I also, again, I'm really trying to get a sense of the lay of the land because, sometimes like shows that have been long running, like you show up and like it seems like people are talking to each other crazy, but they just been doing this for so long that
It's a family.
It's just a family. You know what I mean? But so I try and find a way to give grace to that. I also learned in my faculty days at NYU, there's a great deal of politics there, right? And I would just be like, okay, I'm paying attention. I don't really need to get involved here until it really seems like this is going to affect what I'm trying to do. So because sometimes there's somebody who's performative in their outburst or whatever I mean, but like until it's like, we're going to take that class away from you or we're going to change the curriculum, I'm just going to sit back here and be like, I'm watching. And now I maybe know where you stand. So a lot of it is just really kind of like choosing your battles and picking your moments. I feel like for the most part, if you do that, you'll be able to find a way to collaborate with anybody. I have had folks where my best efforts fell flat. And sometimes then it's just about, we just got to get the work done. You know what I mean? But even still, I never take it personally. And in a weird way, man, like karma does its own duty for you,
As they say, some famous person once said, karma's a bitch.
Yeah.
It's interesting too, because there's no place anywhere that it's written that you're supposed to have fun doing this job.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be nice.
It should be.
It should be fun. We're making movies. We're telling stories. We're playing make-believe. It should be fun. But
right.
There's nowhere that it's written that your DP has to be a cool dude.
Right.
Or your executive producer or the writer that you're working with or somebody is just a pain in the ass because of their own personal stuff or their own baggage that they're bringing along. And you've got to learn how to deal with that. That's why I always tell people, go ahead.
Hey, I was going to say, I will say though, like part of there's I don't know if you watch Curb Your Enthusiasm, but there's an episode where they're at a dinner party and Larry David's like, you're not a good middle, right? And it was like the person who was sitting in the middle of the table, he's like, that person has a responsibility to conduct the conversation and keep it going, right? And I feel like directing is kind of being a good middle. Like you might even be a guest in this house, but like, can you keep things moving? Can you like keep people excited and energized? And like, can I bring an energy to this that hopefully maybe brings an energy out of people that they didn't have on last week's episode? So how can I take it upon myself to impact that? And also then make my experience better.
Now, if you had the opportunity to go back in time and talk to Little Pete, Little Pete, who got that Super 8 camera, that guy, and go, man, Pete, listen, I'm from the future. Ignore that for a second.
I know it's weird.
Just bear with me. Kind of like the LeBron commercial where it's the old LeBron and the young LeBron. Yeah. That kind of scenario. What would you tell yourself? What's the one thing that is like, man, listen, this is what you really got to look out for?
I would just say, before the specificity of your question, I would say you're doing everything right. You don't know it yet, but you are, but if you're going to ask me, what is the one thing you would look out for?
Or be aware of, or,
I would say, look out for yourself. Right. Because, your real opponent is the person in the mirror. It's how long you can stay in the game. You know what I mean? And if you are aware of that, and if you can constantly check yourself, right? Because like, and I don't, and I'm not trying to say like people shouldn't have emotions and shit. Like you should. Like if you have a bad day, have a bad day. But like that doesn't mean you have to have a bad week, right? Doesn't mean you have to like, you know, throw things down the toilet or pivot away from like your dreams. Like acknowledge the emotions and the feelings, but just know that like in trying to be positive about it, I'll say not everybody is out here to keep you down or get you, but they're not necessarily working actively to boost you up. And that's fine. So like, don't do their job to yourself. Your job should be to make sure that you wake up every day and say, what do I need to do to attack this thing that I want? And I say attack, and I mean attack. You know what I mean? Because like, this is an active thing. It's an aggressive thing.
Yeah.
You have to
like hustle, man. You gotta drive.
You gotta hustle and be committed to it. And like just remember, like it's on you. Now, obviously, there's all kind of institutional shit and like there's all kind of other challenges and there are outside forces, but like it is on you to like be aware of the forces that are particular to you and then see what you can do to get around them. Because, you know, my outside forces as a Black guy trying to get into TV are different from, you know, a Latinx woman, or different from a military vet, or, you know what I mean? Like, but still, your only opponent is in the mirror.
There's enough obstacles on this road without you throwing some more in front of yourself.
Right.
That's what I always say.
You know, it's like in movies. I always like when somebody like gets mad and they trash their room. I'm like, I would never trash my room.
Man, I have felt like destroying stuff through my journey in life. I've never like, I gotta clean this up. Like,
yeah, I'll never trash my stuff.
I'm not going to throw my life-size Yoda against the wall. That's just crazy.
Exactly.
You know, that's insane. You know, one thing I always wonder about, because I've directed some television, but not at the level that you've directed television with like a cast. The TV shows I've done are mostly starting out and they're one-off miniseries kind of things. But when you're working with actors who know their characters better than you, much better than you, how do you direct that? What's your advice on that?
You know, like, I mean, I'm looking right here, right? Like I have a Post-it note right here on my computer. I have several ones, right? I think this is from Mike Nichols. He said, all scenes or all good scenes are either fights, negotiations, or seduction, you know, through which a character is either nurturing, using, or damaging. And so that is helpful to me in drawing out, you know, the best in a scene, if perhaps it's not on the page. You know, when I talk to directors, I mean, when I talk to actors, I have things here like I feel versus I think, because we can argue with what I think. You know, I think you should try this. I think you should do this. Well, I feel you should do this. You can't shoot that down in the same way as I feel. What if we were to, you know, instead of let's do this, right? Like I remember the first time I said, let's get one like this. And somebody was like, well, I don't want to do that. You know, I felt like slapped, you know? And so how can I not feel that way again? I can change my language, you know? And also I'd like you to try. So it's less about me imposing something and more about me offering a road towards something that we can collaboratively agree on. You know what I'm saying? And even it's the same with working with a DP. Like I know this stuff, but I don't say throw a 35 on. I'll say, let's get wider and do this and do that. You know what I mean? Like, and if they throw 45 on, I'll be like, let's get a little wider. You know what I mean? I don't need to prescribe the exact path, because then I'm taking them out of the process. And so a lot of it, I think question driven directing is much more successful in A, for me, not having somebody tell me no and getting me mad inside. And then B, like I can find out where they're coming from. You know, a lot of times I'll even ask, like, well, what's your approach here? What are you thinking in this moment? Because they may answer that question in a way that would totally nullify the note I was about to give. And I just saved myself embarrassment from looking like I don't understand what they're doing. And I think that's a little more unique to TV, perhaps, because there's a protection over the character that, you know, the word choice is important. There's a longer connection to the character where I think more things have been affirmed versus on a film, we're looking to explore and find it. And so, you know, I'm also reading the person and seeing whether or not they are open to options, because sometimes, you know, folks want to do it one way and like feel that you're pulling the strings out from what they want to do if you go get one different or nuanced option. And maybe that's because every time they do, they use the other one and they fuck up the overall performance in the actor's mind. So, you know, it's like there's so many things that you're trying to read and gauge. But in a nutshell, that's kind of the approach.
That's a fantastic answer to that question, because I'm always fascinated about how you approach that. I love the question approach instead of, because in features it's like, we're going to do this. Let's try this, because it's a feature and we're all kind of developing this character and this story as we're going along. But when you walk on Blackish on season 4, I mean, Lawrence Fishburne already knows what Lawrence Fishburne's going to do. You know, at the end of the day.
And, you know, there's this thing, I think we're all kind of, at least, I mean, maybe I am. I don't know if younger folks are, but, you know, coming up, it was the idea, like the director was like this kind of like military drill sergeant presence who kind of, you know, commanded all things by fiat, you know what I mean? And like, I think that, you know, that's just part of how society was, you know what I mean? And I personally don't feel the need to have that kind of presence, you know, because I know that I'm, you know, again, these words get so, I was going to say, I know that I'm in charge, and I, you know, I don't know if that's the right word, but I know that I'm like captaining this ship, at least for.
You're responsible.
I'm responsible, right?
Yep.
And that doesn't have to feel like I have to make you know.
But that's a quiet confidence of just doing this so long that you don't need to prove anything to anybody. That's when you're younger, you're trying to prove all the time that you're supposed to be in the room. But when you get to our age and we're in the room for a reason, man. We've lived life and we got shrapnel, and you know, the last thing I need to do is to prove to you that I can direct. Like I've been doing this for a while. Like, you know, I don't need to prove to you. Like I'm trying to prove to you that I can conduct a conversation for a podcast. Like I've done a couple of these. You know? So it's just kind of like this. It's kind of like this comfort
by a couple,
by a few. But the point is that you just feel comfortable and you feel confident without arrogance, and that takes time.
And even now, man, like this is one thing I've been doing as of, you know, the last maybe 10 episodes or so. Like I used to always like, I'd have my iPad and scriptation, and I'd be like looking at the script while they're acting. And like, I don't even do that anymore. I don't even like, I look at the script in the rehearsal. Obviously I prep from the script, but now like I just watch. And the moment it feels like I'm not watching something that I can see other people watching, like that's just the antenna that I'm governed by. And so sometimes they'll be like, oh, wait, what's the line? I'll be like, ask the script supervisor. I don't know. That's their job. Like I'm not trying. Before I don't want to say like, I don't know where I am in the script. Like I don't know where we are in the script. But pick it up from, you know, pick it up from tell them where the best pickup line is, you know, like, because my job is to preserve and protect the audience's experience, and the audience is not reading the fucking script.
Isn't it interesting though? Like, I don't know about you, but when you first started, in your 20s, man, you had everything down to the, like, you prepped and prepped and prepped, and like you had storyboards and shot lists, and you like over prepped. But then nowadays you just get on the set and you're just like, I see what we're gonna do, guys. Let's just kind of feel it out today. Like I mean, like I shot a whole feature that way. I literally shot a whole feature.
Yeah.
We just got on location. All right, let's put the camera there. Let's go shoot this whole thing. All right, let's do this. That didn't work. Let's try it over there. And it's just like kind of like it's jazz. You start becoming a jazz player, as opposed to someone who's constantly reading music. Does that make sense?
Right. Oh, it makes perfect sense. But the amount of music you have to have read to do that, is the thing that can be discounted. And like when folks see people at the height of their craft, what they don't see is the height of the prep. So it's an earned approach.
It's interesting. Like someone like Ridley Scott, who made his first feature at 40, and everyone was like, "Oh, he's making his first feature at 40." I'm like, he had shot, I think, 2,500 commercials. He had gotten, he's way past the 10,000 hour mark.
By
the time he got his first feature, can you imagine what it's like walking on a set with Ridley now? I mean, I can't even comprehend the thousands of hours that man's been on set. It's like his brother too, Tony. They both were like that. It's just, they're just geniuses. They could just riff and they could just kind of go, but it takes time. It's not only how much music you read, it's how much music you write as well along that path.
Yes.
Without question.
Yeah.
Now, as directors, man, there's always a day on set that you feel like the entire world's coming down around you. It could be on the feature, it could be on the television show. You tell me which one it is. I always like to say, most directors like, you mean every day? I'm like, no, not every day. But there's that one crazy day that you feel like the entire world's coming down around you. Like, I don't know how we're gonna make it. I don't know how we're gonna get past it. That freeze technique that you used could have been answered this question, but is there any other day that happened to you, and how did you overcome that day?
Man, in the prep that we're talking about that no one sees, for me, like, I always prep and block scenes as if I were making my feature. That's always like my first swing, obviously within the vein of the show, but like my first swing is always like, I look at it and like, they'll never do. We don't have time for this, but there are like kernels of something that indicate the kind of entry point to the scene that I can simplify. And so sometimes I end up blocking scenes 3 or 4 different ways before I'm like, okay, boom, that's what we'll start. That will be my target. Because actors have points of view and sometimes it changes, but like I can always keep the essence of it, or I can pivot totally. So when things go haywire, oftentimes I can kind of simplify down to what I like to think of as like the most important moment in the scene. Right. So like if it's just like, all right, I gotta get real simple. And we got to do a oneer. But the most important moment in the scene is this. And so we're going to make sure that oneer ends in a close up that I can tilt down and tag whatever detail and then come back up and pan for the reaction, because that's the scene right there, And so it's kind of just knowing what the bare minimum is as far as the audience understanding what is happening, and knowing that all the toys and all the things and all the sauce that we can put on it are great. But at the end of the day, like what's the nutrient? And so, that happens all the time. I feel a little less pressure. I will honestly say on TV, because more often than not, it's not my fault. You know what I mean? Like if it's like, I just did something last week and like the generator didn't work. So they had to go get another generator and blah, blah, blah. And like, yes, I had to become even more efficient, but I'm like, that shit ain't on me. Like I didn't,
I didn't bring that generator. That's not my Jenny.
So I'm still going to make the day. Like I pride myself on making the day, and I can make the adjustments, but if for some reason we can't, I mean, if everybody's being honest, we're all going to know why it didn't happen.
Right. It wasn't because you were doing a 15-minute oneer
Right.
on a show that's going to take maybe out of that 15-minute oneer 1 minute.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Exactly.
It's not your extravagances that got us here. It's the Jenny that didn't work, or the
Yeah.
actor that didn't want to come out of the trailer.
Yeah. And then keeping a cool head too, man. Like people just like that's so much of the job. Like,
Oh God, yeah, man.
keeping a cool head and like, if you think about, and this is TV specific, but like I make this statement and I feel like I need to go and actually do the math on this, but let's just say a day of shooting, you look at dailies and you've got probably 30 to 40 minutes of footage, right? But you were there for 13 hours, right? So what people are going to remember is the 13-hour experience with you, not the 30 to 40 minutes of dailies, or at the end result, the 44 or 22 or 60-minute show. And so like the experience that you give people as a person is arguably more, or if not equally important to your work as a creative person.
The best advice I always give filmmakers coming up, like, what's the best advice? I go, don't be a dick.
Exactly. Yeah.
Don't be, because man, there's people who have less talent and are less experienced, and I'll hire them faster than I'll hire a dick who's more experienced and more talented. Because who do you want to be on set for 13 hours with?
Right. Nobody needs that in their life, man. Like,
and as you get older, man, you just put up with less and less crap.
Yeah. And that's why people work with the same people over and over again. It's like, I know everything I know all the vibes here.
Yeah.
Perfect. Let's go.
Let's rock and roll. Yeah. Now, let's talk about your book Transitions, man, because, this is a book that I wish I had. I'm sure you wish you had it when we were coming up.
Yeah, man.
So tell me how that book came about and what's the purpose of the book for the filmmaking community. It's
exactly what you said. It was, I in all the years in that, 99 to 2017 period, this was what fed me word wise. Fast Company magazine, Wired, I forget what book club I was in, but I was getting books like, 50 directors talk about their first, their first feature. And, I like one anecdote from that. I remember Mike Figgis had done whatever his first movie was. And I think he had a scene, I hope I'm not messing this up, but a scene that maybe with like Tommy Lee Jones or Edward James Olmos or something. And he ended up having to reshoot because he was kind of hesitant to give him the real thing. Like he didn't know how to communicate the direction that he needed. And he just never did it. And they needed to reshoot. And it was so tense because now he's reshooting. And he was like, I just need you to fucking do this or whatever he said. And then he was like, oh, okay, I'll do that. and this thing that he had been so apprehensive to do was like, you just got to do it. So like I was soaking up anecdotes like that, reading Story, the 48 Laws of Power, The Hero's Journey, making movies by Sidney Lumet, all of Spike Lee's books. And I was just like, I feel like there's a book that mixes all of these things that is missing. And so, initially my book was called Thanks for Nothing. And it was going to be, it was after I'd raised, $520,000 to make my feature. And I chronicled everything. And I was like, I want to talk about how like not having had resources was the best thing for me, and how it shouldn't be a limitation for you. And then never wrote that, but like I always kept a little document, and as I did more things, shot my first commercial, did a music video for, 6 figures or whatever, I would kind of update and keep like bullet points of what the lessons were. And so once I got into TV, I was like, well, what's the real thing here? And to me, the thing is, look at all these pivots. I go from short filmmaker to feature filmmaker to running my production company, faculty member to, branded content guy, you know what I mean? And like, and now here I am at TV, and there have been principles along the way. So it's chronicling that journey in a 3-act hero's journey structure with like the setup, the conflict, the resolution being getting that first episode. And then each chapter has a keyword that's kind of like the principle to guide you through this moment or this stage, wherever it happens for you. And then lastly, it's like a mixture of like how to, inspiration, and self-help. And so that's kind of like I recognize that was what I was always looking for in the things that I was reading. And so I wanted to merge everything into one. And then I have my own podcast, Let's Shoot with Pete Chapman. And so I took 10 of the director conversations and have them in the back. So if you feel like, oh, you're just hearing me talk about this stuff, like, well, no, you can listen to Oscar-winning Matthew Cherry or, Rob McElhenney or Michael Spiller or Millicent Shelton, like, and really get kind of hear the principles over and over again that all these creative folks have had to subscribe to on their journey. And so, that's the long-winded kind of full-throated like genesis of the book, but like it's been great because I've found like a lot of the responses and reviews have been that it's done exactly for people what I had hoped.
That's awesome, man. And I'm so glad that this book exists and it's out there for people. As you know, this is what I do all the time, trying to help filmmakers along the path and let them know that they're going to get slapped in the face and prepare for that slap. You just understand where you're going and how to and get ready and how you're going to how long it's going to take to get where you are, man. But I'm glad that you put something together that has tools that people can really use and demystify a little bit of like I always say, Hollywood's real good at the sizzle but sucks at the steak. And it's so damn true, right? It's so damn true.
A big fajita tray coming to your table.
Big fajita tray. But then it's like, oh, it's Taco Bell. Oh man, what happened?
Exactly.
Now, one thing I wanted to ask you, man, because you've been able to do this and you talk about it in your book, the importance of pivoting and understand how to pivot. So many filmmakers and screenwriters, for that matter, going through the business, they get stuck on one thing and they can't see past it. So like, I'm only going to be a feature director. I'm only going to be a music video director. I'm only going to do commercials. And when other opportunities present themselves, they don't pivot. And you went from feature to television. I don't know if television was always the goal or not, but you started off in shorts and features.
Right.
So can you talk a little bit about that importance of being able to just kind of move and shake as things come at you?
Yeah, man. I mean, look, I noticed in like the late aughts, I guess that's what people say, right? 07, 08, 09, like a friend of mine, Seath Man, who's also in the anecdotes at the back of the book, he had done the Disney ABC program and he ended up directing on Grey's Anatomy and then The Wire. And I was just watching like, man, this is like TV's kind of where the stories are. You know what I mean? Like, and it was early in the shift and it would only be cemented year after year as like, the golden age of television revealed itself through new shows after new show. And so, and I also had the experience of 6 years to raise money for a feature, of which I paid myself $15,000. I'm like, this ain't sustainable. And so, and if I'm a director, I want to direct. I'll do anything I want to go where the storytelling is, right? So that's why branded content, commercials, music videos, TV, film, like I have a feature script I have to finish in September because I still want to direct films. And so, man, it was just like, how do I get into that space? I looked at what was happening. I had my friend Seath as like a kind of aspirational target of like, well, here's a guy that I know that did it. I know plenty of people who are going through these programs and aren't, but like, here's somebody I literally can call and I know that did it. And so, I just attacked it in the only way that I could, which was through these director programs, because it's such a either nepotistic or who kind of dynamic. Well, how do I get into some category of being known? And so that was how that worked for me. And then even in there, once I was kind of big toe in the door, I had to think about, well, what is the target? And, again, all these war and sports analogies, but like, what's the target? And it's like, well, I want to continue to be able to do like everything. Right. So we made, with my team and at their suggestion too, we made a concerted effort to go after half-hour single camera comedies. So it wasn't like, oh, I'm just saying I want to do TV. It was like, I want to do half-hour single camera comedies, because both in front of the camera, like Jamie Foxx, or behind the camera, like Adam McKay, you've seen people go from comedy to drama, but not really the other. And so while I was trying to break in on comedy, I was also, where I could, having meetings with drama folks, and shadowing on drama shows where I could, so I could someday get, both of those feathers in my cap. And that was it was a very concerted effort. And so like the last year or two of like doing things like The Flight Attendant and and then, even like these kind of like genre blending things like Love Life, like that's been something that I was trying to pivot toward from the beginning of my ever getting an episode. And so, I think it's important to kind of remain open. I think being platform agnostic is a good idea, because, one thing I haven't ever done is a multicam, and I want to, and I need to, because there are great multicam shows, but B, for all we know, half-hour single camera comedies could lose their luster. It's cheaper to make a multi-camera show anyway, and studios and networks might decide we're only doing that for the next 3 years. And then what are you going to say? Oh, I don't want to work.
And that's the thing. And the business, for so many years, the business stayed the way it was for, like 70 years. Films are films, 80 years. The whole process, from the filmmaking process to how I got out, and then television was that. Then the cable companies came in and started messing things up. Then VHS started to come in. But then when the streaming situation showed up, it changed the game completely again. Yes. So if you aren't, and now things are moving so quickly and so differently and so fast, things that were true a year ago are not true now. And then the pandemic happened, and then everything went out the window now. And then everyone's starting to. So if you don't have the skill of pivoting, you won't make it long term. You won't make it long term. You have to have that skill. And I love that you it's rare to find a director who does Blackish and Grey's Anatomy. Mm-hmm. Like that's not in the television world, that's not normally, right? No, there's not. I
know who I know that kind of do or does about comedy and drama, but it's not 10 people, and then also too, man, like, I feel very fortunate because I do networks. Like I just wrapped Grey's Anatomy on Monday, and my next show will be the reboot of Fatal Attraction for Paramount Plus with Joshua Jackson and Lizzie Kaplan. So that's a streaming thing. It's like 8 episodes. It's going to be.
Are you doing all 8, or
I'm doing the second to last episode.
Okay.
And then after that, I'm going to go do the show Minx, which is HBO Max, and it's a period piece. It's a woman who kind of starts a Playgirl-esque magazine in the 70s, and it deals with it's a commentary on a lot of issues that affect women. And then after that, I'm going to do American Auto. You know what I mean? And it's like, I love to kind of hop back and forth between these different things. And each show or each genre requires a different like approach. Because some you tell the story with the camera, others you have to find how to let the joke happen on screen in an interesting way. And yeah, man, it's a concerted effort to be able to find opportunities in all of those.
Now, brother, I'm going to ask you a few questions I ask all of my guests. What advice would you give a filmmaker trying to break into the business today?
So a filmmaker trying to break into the business today, I would say first to start positive. You're breaking into it at a time where it's easier than ever to break into it. And you probably have more access to education than anyone ever before, even if you don't go to a film school. So go ahead and make something. I would challenge them, though, to think about what is important to them, what kind of stories they have responded to in the books or films that they've watched or read, and try and hone in as quickly as possible on the things that they'd like to be involved with saying. And then once they figure that out, try everything, try every position, meet as many people as you can, and just, make a project every quarter. And every year you come out with 4 things.
And that IMDb gets fatter and fatter. All right. What did you learn from your biggest failure?
Man, this is an interesting question, man, because it's funny, man. I don't look at things as failures. So I'm trying to like change that perspective to answer the question.
Something that didn't go the way you'd like it to go, sir.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that, I would say that collectively, my failures would be moments where I failed to read the room. And so, like, I'm thinking back to a project that, it was early in my career. It was not a TV show, it was a web series. And like people were asking me for like a shot list. And I was like, no, no, I got this. Like, you're good. Trust me. And like it was like 10-page days, and I was always making the day, and locations were fluctuating. And so I was just kind of like, I only got so much time in the day to produce a shot list that I'm not necessarily going to like adhere to. Feels like not the best use of my time. And so I was leading with that as an example. But on their end, it's a big project for them. They don't know me like I know me, and they can't eat a bagel at craft service with the same level of comfort of like Pete's got it as they would have if they had some shot list that I wrote and say, here's what we're doing today. And I could think of a variety of examples where a little misreading of the room left people with a feeling that they didn't need to have. And I could have easily taken care of that. Now, at that moment in time, my process wasn't as sharp as it is today. So it was still harder to do. But like, you have to be able to look at something and say, well, what was my involvement in that? And maybe, instead of a no in that situation, I could have explained what I just explained to you, which is like, we don't have time, but how about we talk it out every morning or whatever? You know what I mean? Like
something. Give him something. Give him a bone.
Give him something. So I would think, I think listeners, viewers, extrapolate that as you want, but I think failure to read the room is the doom, is always what you can point back to for anything that doesn't go as well as it could.
I have a challenge for you, sir. Next job you go on, I want you to wear a t-shirt and the back it says Pete's got it, and just walk on the set with a T in the back. On the front it says director, on the back it says Pete's got it.
Yeah, I like that. I'll report back, let you know how that goes.
Let me know how hard it is to get the next job after that shirt goes on that day. So Alex, I was fired off that. And now my agents will return my calls.
Now I'm doing radio.
Now I'm doing podcasts. I mean, seriously. Now, what is the lesson that took you the longest to learn, whether in the film business or in life?
I would say the lesson that it took me the longest to learn was work smarter, not harder.
Mm-hmm.
because part of your fuel, it's like going back to like that thing we were talking about earlier, the quote that I can't attribute to the person, like we're guided by our tastes until our talent can match it, more or less. Like the flip side of that is, or the also included in that is like, we're guided by our hustle. And also being from New York, there's just something about like, I'm out working you, you know what I mean? Like I'm up earlier than you. I'm up later than you, you eat lunch. I don't, you know what I mean? Like it's stuff like that. And so, but that's not something you can do forever. And B, particularly with the birth of our daughter, like I can't prep all weekend now. That's not what I want to do. You know what I mean? So it means that I have to be very like strategic and methodical and deliberate about how I prep and take incoming matters and prioritize them so that I'm dealing with what I need to deal with now for whatever is my next immediate milestone. And, that takes a little while because it's like, well, that's not my process. I like to do this. I like to do that. It was like, well, you got a concept meeting today at noon. So skim through the script and figure out what you got to talk about. You can't highlight shit. You don't have time for it. You got the script this morning. So like,
that's not my process.
That's not my process. Right? So you have to be nimble and flexible. And trust that now that you've been hustling for so long, you've got the experience level to pivot from what made you comfortable before and find new footing to land on, and you'll still be just as great.
I'm going to just tell you a quick story that illustrates exactly what you said when I was a kid. I was 20 something playing tennis like a madman. And one day I went to play tennis and there was like this older dude, probably like in his, at the time, late 50s was older dude. But late 50s,
young,
early 60s.
Very young.
Very young. Now we look at him like, that's a young man. What are you talking about? But when you're in your 20s, it was like this old dude is like, you want to play? And we're like, yeah, let's play. And I was this 20-year-old, like that young, and this guy just sat in one place on the tennis court and he just went, boop. And I'm running to this side, boop, running to that side, boop. He just knew where to hit the ball. And I was working harder, but he was working smarter. And I never forgot that lesson. I was like, man, how would you do that? He goes, I just put the ball where you weren't.
Yeah.
That's as simple as that.
Meanwhile, you're trying to blaze a forehand down the line where he's standing. And he's like,
no, I'm trying to reinvent the forehand
in
your own mind, to hit the forehand like no one has ever hit it before. That's where you are.
With top spin and slice.
Top spin and slice with smoke that comes off of it when it hits. Last question, sir. 3 of your favorite films of all time.
Oh, boy. Okay. So oh, man, that's fucking tough. Okay, in no particular order. And I'll give a little reason with each. I will say Casablanca, just the perfect film, a film about the war, made during the war, that it's about a little bit of a musical, love story, drama. Can't tell me it's not funny.
It's funny as hell.
Can't tell me it's not funny. Like that's a good ass movie. Man. Such a big fan of Spike. I love Do the Right Thing, but I'm going to say X, Malcolm X.
That's a tough choice between the two, man, because X is a masterpiece, but Do the Right Thing did that.
It's a masterpiece
man,
too,
it's not only a masterpiece, but it just exploded on the scene. Like X, he was already Spike when he did X, but man, Do the Right Thing, man, when it came out, I was working at the video store. I was working at the video store, man. I'm like, you gotta watch Do the Right Thing. Like, it just exploded. There's few movies in history.
It's visceral filmmaking, and it's but X is like, it's like working at, it's like you, like all the films you've done before have like prepared you for this film. And then just the performance is phenomenal from Denzel. So that I'd say those two. And then this might be weird, but maybe not. I'll say 7.
Oh, it's one of my top 5.
Okay.
I'm a Fincher fanatic, bro. I'm a Fincher fanatic.
That's also, I think, a perfect film in many ways. And I think for when it came out, it was in one of the earliest representations of genre blending to a new degree, which is like it's a buddy cop comedy to some degree. It's a thriller, it's a horror film, it's, you know, all of these things, and it leans on the right tone and the right filmmaking tools in the right moments. And I think that's kind of what today's television does. There's genre blending that gives you a little bit of what you know, but, you know, a percentage of what you don't. But because you're able to anchor it in these genres you're familiar with, I think people go on the ride with you.
Right. I mean, Yellowstone and Breaking Bad and those kind of things. Yeah, like you can't tell me those aren't funny shows. Both.
Yeah.
Now, brother, I appreciate you. By the way, where can people buy the book? Where can people find out more about you and what you're doing, my friend?
Oh yeah. So you can buy the book on Amazon or Goodreads. It's called Transitions: A Director's Journey and Motivational Handbook. I hope you buy it. I hope you review it. Let people know that you like it. I've also got a podcast called Let's Shoot with Pete Chapman, which is available everywhere: Spotify, Apple, all that good stuff. And then I'm at Pete Chapman on Instagram and Twitter. I'm more active on Instagram. I find I'm not witty enough on Twitter. You know, I don't have time to be witty. I got time to post this picture. But I love to share behind the scenes content and kind of go on some rants here and there about the industry and filmmaking and directing. Man, this has been awesome to chat with you, Alex. I love what you're doing. I think it's a fuel for creative souls out there. So please keep doing it. And man, it's been great to rap with you, man. I really appreciate it.
And I appreciate you for writing the book and for everything you do and being an inspiration to young filmmakers around the world. And I thank you, man. Thank you for your hard work as well, brother. Thank you, man.
Appreciate you, sir.